The sea is your home. It is your entire world. You live upon the chest of a fallen god. Your people call it a statue ship. Its hollowed stone torso is your shelter. Its outstretched arm holds the sail's mast. You are a statue sailor. This life is all you have ever known. The ocean stretches into forever in all directions. It is a canvas of endless blue and gray. Your ancestors passed down the stories. They said the gods fell from the sky long ago. Their stone bodies became our islands, our vessels. You chip away at the inner walls for tools. You weave nets from your own hair. You catch the shimmering silver fish that swim in the god's shadow. It is a simple life, a hard life. Your ship is named the Silent Gaze. Its face is serene and looks up at the sky. Some nights you climb to the chin. You look at the stars and wonder. Were they once the home of these stone giants? The sky had been a gentle blue for weeks. You had grown comfortable, too comfortable. The sea does not reward comfort. It punishes it with terrible fury. The air turned heavy first. It was a thick blanket you could barely breathe through. Then the water turned a sickly green. The winds began to howl a mournful song. This was no ordinary squall. It was a tempest born from a nightmare. Waves rose like mountains around your small vessel. The Silent Gaze was tossed about like a child's toy. You lashed yourself to the stone nose of the statue. Salt water stung your eyes and filled your lungs. The sky cracked open with light. Not the sun, but a violent, angry white. Thunder shook the very stone beneath you. The sail ripped away with a sound like a dying scream. You lost all sense of direction. Days and nights blurred into a single terrifying moment. The storm did not feel natural. It felt like a decision. The ocean was sending you somewhere. You just prayed it was not to the bottom. The storm finally broke. It left you adrift and broken. Your mast was a splintered stump. Your supplies were mostly gone. You floated for what felt like an eternity. Then you saw it, a smudge on the horizon. Land. You used a piece of the broken mast to paddle. Your arms burned with every stroke. The smudge grew into a coastline. It was a shoreline of impossible structures. You did not understand what you were seeing. Your vessel eventually scraped against soft sand. Figures emerged from the mist. They were tall and slender people. Their skin had a soft gray tone. They wore simple robes woven from sea reeds. They did not look hostile. They looked reverent. They gathered around your beached statue. They knelt in the sand. One of them approached you slowly. You were weak, exhausted, a survivor. But they did not see a survivor. They saw a prophet arriving on a sacred chariot. You collapsed on the shore. They rushed to help you. Their touch was gentle. They offered you water from a clay flask. It was the sweetest thing you had ever tasted. They spoke in a soft, melodic language. You could not understand their words, but their tone was one of worship. One of them pointed to your statue ship. Then they pointed to your face. They made a gesture of a falling star. You had a feeling they misunderstood your arrival. They probably thought you were the statue's designated driver, a divine chauffeur. They led you away from the beach. Your legs were unsteady, but you managed to walk. You passed through a curtain of thick vines. What you saw on the other side stopped you. It was a city, but not like any you could imagine. It was built between two colossal stone legs. They were the lower half of a statue, a perfect match for the torso you sailed upon. The city was a web of bridges and homes. They were woven from wood and vine. They clung to the immense stone calves and knees. This was a city woven from giants. The people lived in the shadow of their gods. Your boat was not just a boat. It was the missing piece of a much larger puzzle. You realized your entire history was wrong. There wasn't one fallen god. There were many. The people here called themselves the Builders. They lived in harmony with these broken titans. They used the stone for shelter, for life. They did not hollow their gods out. They built upon them. A deep respect was clear in every structure. They took you to their highest dwelling. It was a platform built on the statue's knee. An old builder with kind eyes greeted you. He gestured for you to sit. They offered you strange, delicious fruits. You ate until your stomach ached. You tried to explain with hand gestures. You pointed to your boat. You made a shape of a body. You tried to show you were just a sailor. They simply smiled and bowed their heads. Your bad charades probably just confirmed you were a mime from the heavens. They brought you gifts, an offering. These were not fruits or simple crafts. They were ancient relics, carefully preserved. They laid them on a woven mat before you. Your breath caught in your throat. These items were familiar. There was a device made of smooth, white material. It fit perfectly in your hand. Your people used fragments of these as cutting tools. There was a cylinder of clear crystal. It felt warm to the touch. You had only ever seen tiny shards of it before. Your ancestors used them to start fires. And there was a dark, thin slate. It was perfectly flat and cold. You had seen pictures of these etched into cave walls. The legends called them tablets of knowledge. The Builders handled these items with such care. To them, they were holy. To you, they looked like tools. You picked up the white device. A seam ran along its side. You had a sudden, strange impulse, an echo of a memory not your own. You pressed a small indentation. The device hummed softly, and a beam of light shot out. The Builders gasped and fell to their knees. You had just turned on their sacred flashlight. The dark slate felt different. It was heavier than it looked. It had no obvious seams or buttons. The Builders watched you with wide eyes. They expected a miracle. You felt a pressure you had never known. You were an accidental god, and your warranty was probably expired. You ran your thumb along the edge of the slate. You felt a tiny ridge. You pushed it. The slate remained dark and silent. The Builders murmured, a hint of disappointment in their voices. You felt a flush of embarrassment. You tried again, pushing harder. Then you noticed a faint symbol. It was on the back of the slate. It looked like a stylized sun. You pressed your thumb against it. The slate flickered. A soft light bloomed from its surface. Words and images began to dance in the forgotten dark. The Builders let out a collective sigh of awe. You stared at the glowing screen. The language was strange. It was made of sharp, clean lines. But the images were clear. They showed starfields and spinning worlds. This was not a holy tablet. It was a machine. The slate displayed a title page. The symbols were alien, but one word was clear. It was a number, 7. Below it, text scrolled too fast to read. Then it settled on a log entry. The date was meaningless to you. But the words that followed changed everything. A man's face appeared on the screen. He looked human, exactly like the statues. He wore a uniform you did not recognize. His voice was calm, scientific. The slate translated his words into a simple, universal language of symbols. It spoke of a survey mission. Starborn explorers charting a new world. They were not gods. They were scientists. They were engineers. The log mentioned the planet's unstable geology. It described a plan to build geothermal regulators. The statues, they were the regulators. The log called them anthropic stabilizers, giant machines in human form, a monument to their creators. The mission was called Survey 7. They were not meant to be worshipped. They were meant to save this world. The man on the screen smiled a tired smile. He said they were running out of time. An old man entered the chamber. He was the one who had greeted you. The other builders bowed to him. He was their leader, Elder Keth. He had kind eyes, but they were filled with a deep sadness. He looked at the glowing slate, then at you. He spoke, and this time, another builder translated. His words were slow and careful. The signs were foretold, he said. A piece of the heavens would return. It would be piloted by one of the first ones. He looked at you with desperate hope. Our world is failing, Elder, Keth continued. The ground shakes more each season. The steam vents grow cold. The lifelight of our world fades. He placed a hand on his chest. We believe you were sent to save us. We believe you are our last miracle. You wanted to tell him the truth. You wanted to show him the log, to explain that you were no god. You were just the descendant of a stranded crew. But the look in his eyes stopped you. His people's hope was a fragile thing. What would happen if you shattered it? He led you to the edge of the great knee. He pointed down toward the base of the statue. Far below, the ground was cracked. Faint plumes of steam rose from the fissures. He explained that the heart of their world was cooling. The heat that sustained life was fading. The first humans, your ancestors, had seen this coming. Their giant statues were a desperate solution. They were machines designed to stabilize the planet. But something had gone wrong. The project was never finished. The scientists only delayed the inevitable disaster. Now, generations later, the delay was ending. The planet was on the brink of a deep freeze. The builders' gentle civilization would be wiped out. Their faith in you was all they had left. It was a terrible weight to place on your shoulders. You felt like the universe was playing a very mean prank. You stood there, a simple sailor, a scavenger who lived in a hollowed-out machine. Before you stood a man begging a false god for salvation. The data slate in your hand felt impossibly heavy. It contained the truth. But the truth might be a crueler blow than the freezing cold. You had to make a choice. You could tell them the truth, that you were just a person, that your ancestors were brilliant but flawed, that they had failed. This truth would crush their spirit. It might lead to chaos and despair. Or you could play the part. You could use their faith as a tool. You could pretend to be the prophet they needed. You could lead them, deceive them, for their own good. But could you live with that lie? Could you carry the burden of being their God? Every path felt like a betrayal. You made your decision. It was a choice born of desperation. You looked at Elder Keth. You nodded slowly. You would help them. For now, the lie would have to be enough. A flicker of hope returned to the old man's eyes. He led you down from the high platform. The builders cleared a path. They looked at you with reverence. You felt like an imposter in your own skin. The journey took you to the base of the statue city, to a sealed entrance you had not noticed before. Two builders heaved open a great stone door. It revealed a passage leading down into darkness. A cold wind blew from the depths. It smelled of ozone and ancient metal. This was the entrance to the planet's core, an old human-made facility. They gave you a glowing crystal for light, the one you recognized from the relics. It cast long, dancing shadows on the walls. The passage sloped steeply downward. The air grew warmer, thicker. The pressure increased with every step. You were descending into the heart of the world, and into the heart of a very old lie. The tunnels were clearly not built by the builders. They were smooth and precise. Metal conduits lined the walls. Strange symbols were stenciled at every junction. They were markers left by your ancestors. The path was a pilgrimage into your own forgotten past. After hours of descent, you reached a vast chamber. In the center stood a console. It was dark and silent. The air here was still and heavy. It felt like a tomb. This was the control center for the geothermal regulator. This was the place where it all went wrong. You approached the console. Dust covered every surface. You brushed it away from a small screen. You recognized the sun symbol from the data slate. You pressed your hand against it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the console hummed to life. The screen flickered on. It did not show data or schematics. It showed a face, a woman in the same uniform as the man from the log. She looked tired, but her eyes were full of resolve. This was the captain's final message. "If you are seeing this," she began, her voice steady, "then we have failed. The recording was for you, for any descendant who might find this place." She explained the situation. The planet's core was more unstable than they had predicted. Their technology was not enough. They faced an impossible choice. They could abandon the planet and its people, or they could try a dangerous, untested solution, a full-scale energy transfer to restart the core. The risk of failure was absolute. It would drain their ship's power. It would strand them here forever. "We chose to stay," she said, a sad smile on her face. "We chose to give these people a chance. They built the statues as a legacy, a final act of hope. They knew they would be stranded. They knew their descendants might forget. But they hoped the knowledge would survive. The answer is in the statues themselves," she finished. "The power source is still there. Find it. Complete our work." The message ended. The screen went dark. You stood in the silence of the deep. The truth was heavier than any mountain. Your ancestors were not gods. They were heroes. They had sacrificed everything. And you were a scavenger. You fixed things with scraps and hope. You could not perform miracles. Elder, Keth, and the other builders had followed you. They stood at the entrance of the chamber. They watched you, their faces full of expectation. The weight of their hope was suffocating. You could not maintain the lie any longer. You turned to face them. You held up the data slate. "I am not a god," you said. Your voice echoed in the vast chamber. The translator beside Keth repeated your words. A wave of confusion washed over the builders. "I am not one of the first ones. My people are their children," you explained. "We were stranded here, just like you. We forgot our history. We live on the pieces of their broken ships. We are scavengers, not prophets." You lowered your head. "I cannot fix your world alone." You expected anger, despair. You expected their faith to shatter into a million pieces. Silence descended upon the chamber. It stretched for what felt like an age. Then Elder Keth stepped forward. He did not look angry. He did not look betrayed. He looked relieved. A small, weary smile touched his lips. "We always had our doubts," he said softly. The translator's voice was gentle. The stories did not always align. The relics were clearly tools, not divine toys. But our world was fading. We needed to believe in something. He looked at you not as a god, but as an equal. We did not need a deity to command us. We needed a partner to guide us. You have the knowledge of the first ones in your blood. You understand their creations. He gestured to the silent console. That is more powerful than any miracle. Faith was being replaced by something stronger. Partnership. They were not just the builders. You were not just a statue sailor. You were the two halves of a legacy of survival and ingenuity. The final message from the captain wasn't a command. It was an invitation. You returned to the surface. Everything was different now. The city built on the giant's legs seemed less like a temple. It was more like a workshop. Your statue ship, the Silent Gaze, was not a sacred chariot. It was a vital piece of machinery. You brought your people over from your scattered fleet. The statue sailors met the builders. Your knowledge of scavenging and repair was invaluable. Their understanding of large-scale construction was brilliant. You began to work together. You showed them how to draw power from the statues. You taught them how to read the old schematics. They showed you how to weave structures of incredible strength. You were rebuilding a world, piece by piece. Human ingenuity and builder wisdom joined at last. The great statues were no longer just boats or homes. They became the cornerstones of a new civilization. You worked to finish the task your ancestors started. The future was not guaranteed. But for the first time in generations, it was a future you would all build together.